if anyone else has blue eyes, they kind of know the struggle of just not being able to see anything at any time if it's relatively bright outside, because the sun's not even shining directly in my face and I can't open my eyes properly at all. That didn't help. Welcome back to my car. This is going to be episode 2 of Not So Niche. Somebody just pulled up right next to me. I had like so much space and now I'm scared to talk. Usually in my own car though, I shouldn't care. I'm not even looking. Nobody cares. It's fine. So yeah, this is episode 2 of Not So Niche again, and once again in my car. It's my little happy space. This time around I've come to a little spot I quite like to come to just down the road. I'll show you the lovely view. How gorgeous. And yes, that's my little setup for balancing my phone. I've tried my best to dress as Glinde-y as possible. I've got a little pink top on and I've put my elf halo glow on, if you can't tell. And I'm actually also wearing my earrings. They're like little dangly star earrings. Can you see these? And I got them for my year 11 prom, and I figured it out when I was putting them in. That was almost 6 years ago. So yeah, not a fan of that. Anyway, and my ring actually. I've worn this since I was 15. But it's all coming together now. I'm just so Glinda. And my star. Today I'm going to be talking about the now Oscar-winning costume design of the Wicked film. And Paul Tazwell rightfully won for his stunning costumes in Wicked. I can talk a little bit about them. I do think Paul was very deserving of his win, and it was nice to see Wicked get that win because it wasn't quite the sweep that everybody kind of hoped it would be. Oh, it's just so sad looking at my hair. It's so dark. I really need to get it redone, but it's too much money. It's too expensive to get your hair done these days, not in this economy. So yes, the costume design for Wicked was done by Paul Tazwell, and he is quite a renowned costume designer. He's previously done work on West Side Story, Harriet, which of course was also with Cynthia Erivo, and Hamilton. And he also started off his costume designing career by designing his high school's rendition of The Wiz. So it's a really nice full circle moment for him, coming back and winning an Oscar for doing the costumes for Wicked, which is of course all in the same universe as The Wizard of Oz. I watched a few interviews with Paul Tazwell on YouTube, and I recommend watching them yourselves if you want a little bit more of a deep dive into his process and his how he went about creating the beautiful costumes. But he did mention that he took lots of inspiration from Susan Hilferty, and she was the costume designer for the original Wicked Broadway musical. Paul also stated that across his work on all the films he's done, he's heavily inspired by the previous iterations or the original iterations of these films, such as West Side Story. He did the remake with Steven Spielberg where there was original one. He went back and studied the costume, and he really likes to go in depth and research the time and different sources for the material he's going to be making, which I love. I love the research part of it. I recently actually wrote a Substack for the Nosferatu costume design, which was also nominated for an Oscar, as we saw Lily on stage for that little sketch. So yeah, if you're interested in the costumes of Nosferatu, I've written a little article on Substack, so you can go and read that if you like. And the costume designer for that, she also had a very research-based process. Anyway, back to Wicked. Of course, Paul, the costume designers are never on their own when it comes to doing this grand scheme of costumes. Paul has said that for Wicked there was roughly at max 150 people within the costume department at any one time. So that includes all the different areas of tailoring, the materials, seamstresses, fittings, alterations, sourcing, and all that stuff. But of course Paul is the head of that department. And Paul has been very heavy on all the press for Wicked, mentioning all these names that have helped do the costumes for Wicked, which of course is lovely to see, because sometimes there are so many people on a film set and their names and all their skills often go quite under the radar, and it's only the top stars and the directors that you tend to see. But every person has an important part in the making of that film. I don't know what to do with this. So if we start off with Elphaba, Paul Tazewell said that for each of Elphaba's costumes they actually had 3 copies, and so you can imagine that's a lot of time and effort going into making replicas of every single costume that she wears. And the reason for having 3 was that they had their hero copy, which is the main one that Cynthia would put on to shoot these scenes. They had a spare in case the hero copy was damaged, torn, something got spilled on her, or just something happened and they didn't want to waste time trying to fix it on the day, hold up production, so to have a spare one ready to go to replace it. And then the third one was for Cynthia's stunt double, and I understand that Cynthia really wants to do a lot of the stunts herself, but she's not allowed to do everything, because if your main cast gets hurt, you've not got a production anymore and you're kind of screwed. So for the stunts that are a bit too dangerous for Cynthia, she had a double, and of course that double needs the costume. So when it came to planning Elphaba's costumes, Paul really used a lot of natural motifs in the designs. Some of the details that you can see and sometimes not see include the design of the underside of mushrooms and other fungi. These are mainly seen as like the swirling pleats that is on the blouse that she wears at the Ozdust Ball. And in some other costumes where she's wearing her waistcoat, Paul has said that you can see some fiddle ferns that have been embroidered onto the waistcoat. Now, of course, the most famous silhouette of Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West, is the pointy black hat. And for Wicked, it's a slightly different look. It's not just straight, basic triangle kind of hat. Paul kind of took quite an architectural approach in its shape. It almost has different layers, like a cake, tiers, that's what I mean. Almost has tiers like a cake, each of a different architectural shape, bending different ways, and really is the finishing point for her entire silhouette. And the hat itself is also micro-pleated, which Paul said many of her costumes have micro pleats and just all these different details, which also reminds me of the fact that Cynthia's wig was micro braids. I just thought it was interesting. Now, Elphaba seems to gravitate towards black throughout her entire wardrobe. That's her go-to kind of colour. And Paul reflected that she wears black and gravitates towards that shade because of the emotional state that she's kind of been in since she was a child, since she was born, since her mother died. She's almost been emotionally stuck since she was very young. And even with her shiz uniform, which I think is meant to be, everyone else wears, apart from Glinda, quite a teal blue, Elphaba's version is more of a charcoal grey of the pinstripes for Shiz University. And often there is a deep purple used as an accent in lots of Elphaba's costumes, which you can see if you look a little bit closer. Now, in terms of Glinda, so for Glinda, Paul said the main motifs and everything he kept coming back to was inspired by bubbles, circular shapes and spirals, especially for Glinda's crown. It's obviously bejeweled, but it's all in these spirally shapes taken from her bubble. Now, her bubble gown, the princess dress that she wears when we first see her in the movie, is the modern reiteration of the iconic Glinda dress from The Wizard of Oz. Paul said that they used the Fibonacci spiral as a design point that they kept coming back to. So her dress had many layers, all in these different shapes that when put together would recreate that kind of spiral effect, and when Ariana would move it would look very ethereal and bouncy and just like she's kind of floating away. Paul also said on the Art of Costume podcast that the bubble dress was not only the hardest to design, the hardest to bring to life, and the longest to make. So that proved to be the biggest challenge for Paul and the team. It paid off because it looks perfect. One of my favourite looks is Glinda's Ozdust Ball gown. The dress itself looks like a flower, it's petal-like, and that's because Paul was inspired by a rose that he found when he was out for a walk in London, because that's where they were shooting the film. He just saw that, thought of Glinda, took that back and used that as inspiration for the design. Ombre petal dress is like a burnt orangey pink, and it is just amazing. It's one of the costumes that stuck in my mind the most from the entire film. And for the Ozdust ball, they also took Ariana's shoes and they custom dyed it to match the ombre of the dress. Glinda's overall colour scheme is of course rooted in pink, and Paul also said that some of the foundations of Glinda's costume design was taken from 1940s and 50s Hollywood glamour and some Dior kind of couture looks rooted in lots of romanticism. The other looks of hers that stuck in my mind are her version of the Shiz uniform, of course in pink, and also the suit, waistcoat, little matching sets that she wears when they go to the Emerald City. And to briefly touch on a couple other characters, Paul said in an interview about Fiyero that lots of his costumes, the patterning was heavily geometric and sometimes tribal. Paul took lots of inspiration from Spanish equestrian clothing and military uniforms. For Jeff Goldblum's Wizard, Paul has said that the character itself comes from a carnival kind of background, and for his few costumes, you possibly only see him in one or two in this first film. There are lots of chains which include little trinkets, and apparently on one of the chains there's a little balloon charm, which is cute. And then for Madame Morrible, she is one of the only additional characters that has actual magical qualities. So Paul wanted to reference her power over the weather in lots of her costumes. So if you take a closer look, there are lots of astronomical references, such as the moon and the stars, and that's in the beading and embroidery within her costumes and on some gloves that she wears. And I've only watched Wicked once when it first came out in the cinema. I went to watch it with my mum. Congratulations are due to Paul for winning his Oscar, and as he said, notably being the first black man to win the costume design Oscar, so very big achievement and very well deserved. Stepping away into one of my favourite things, which is what my previous video was on, method dressing. The press tour for Wicked was insane. It lasted forever, but the styling for mainly Ariana and Cynthia throughout this press tour has been taking method dressing to a whole new level. They really committed to the colour scheme and the feel of the characters for every single stop. Main credit is due to both Ariana's and Cynthia's stylists for this press tour. So Ariana's stylist is Mimi Cottrell, and Cynthia's stylist has been Jason Bolden. And their method dressing began over a year ago now, when they presented an award at last year's Oscars, so the 76th Academy Awards, where Ariana wore this gorgeous Giambattista Valli haute couture, and Cynthia was in Louis Vuitton. And then I'll just quickly pop up some of my favourite looks from the press tour. At the Wall Street Journal Innovator Awards, Ariana was wearing Vivienne Westwood bridal couture. At the Mexico premiere, Cynthia was wearing Tom Brown, and this is fantastic because it's looking at the kind of iconic look, not me being Nosferatu, the iconic Margaret Hamilton, was that her name? The original Wicked Witch. The shadow of her hands, that iconic look, had on the shoulders, which is sick. Ariana again, this time at CinemaCon. She was wearing Oscar de la Renta Spring 2024, and this actually retails, it randomly said this on the website when I was looking, this dress actually retails for $6,990, which I kind of thought it could be more. Like, that is a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw somebody else maybe on a bit more of a minor micro level wearing that piece in like a year's time or something. Cynthia at when they randomly went to the Paris Olympics opening ceremony, I really liked Cynthia's Louis Vuitton look. Again, I love Cynthia's look here for the London premiere. She's wearing Schiaparelli from the fall 2024 collection. And then the most recent Oscars, Ariana Grande also wore Schiaparelli. She had 2 separate Schiaparelli gowns. My favourite was the red one because, hello, I love a reference. Had the shoe ruby slipper on the back of the dress. And then the gown she arrived in was also Schiaparelli. Ugh, my throat is so sore. I was sick last week and I thought I was better, but I can't speak 2 sentences without having to have water. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Wicked Part 2, see where the costumes go, if there are any more progress showing their character arcs through the clothes. I'm sure that Paul will once again astonish us in his design skill, so very excited for that. This was quite a brief overview for Wicked. As I said, I'm feeling a bit sick, so I don't think I could speak any more sentences without having to cough every 5 seconds, but I hope you've enjoyed. I wonder if we'll even get a round 2 of method dressing for Part 2 press. They might tone it down a little bit next time, but who knows. Thank you for watching. Again, if you are interested in reading any of my Substacks, I do write about costume design for different films, and I've started to look more into the history of fashion, different periods and stuff. If that interests you, please check it out, give it a little read, and yeah, if you like videos like this, subscribe. Why not? It's free. Thank you. Bye. Damn.